The first time I truly understood the depth of my family's conditional love was during a humid summer evening in our cramped Miami apartment. I was 24, fresh out of law school, my future stretching before me like an uncharted map. My mother, Rosa, was arranging freshly pressed tortillas, her movements precise and calculated, much like the way she approached every aspect of my life. "Elena," she said, not looking up. "Marco Hernandez's mother called. His law firm is looking for junior associates." The implication was clear. A respectable Latino man, a traditional career path, a predetermined future. I took a deep breath. "I'm not interested in Marco, Mama. I want to pursue corporate law on my own terms." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken expectations. My father, Miguel, a construction worker who had immigrated from Puerto Rico decades ago, remained silent. His silence was always more cutting than my mother's words. As months passed, the conversations became more pointed. "When are you going to settle down?" they would ask. "A good daughter, a good wife," my aunts would murmur during family gatherings. The subtext was always the same: conform, comply, be what we expect. But I wasn't that daughter. I was ambitious, driven, and unapologetically myself. When I met Sarah during a legal conference in Chicago, everything changed. She was brilliant, kind, and saw me in a way no one else ever had. A corporate lawyer specializing in international human rights, Sarah challenged me intellectually and loved me unconditionally. The day I came out to my family was like watching a carefully constructed building collapse. My mother's face transformed into a mask of disappointment. "No Rodriguez woman has ever been." She started, then stopped herself. My father's silence was deafening. "This is who I am," I said, my voice steady. "Sarah is the person I love. She makes me happy." The rejection was not sudden, but gradual. Phone calls became shorter. Invitations to family gatherings disappeared. My cousins would look away when I entered a room. The whispers started. "Poor Miguel and Rosa. What will people say?" Cultural expectations are invisible chains, I realized. They bind you softly at first, then tighten imperceptibly until you can't breathe. My family's love had always been transactional. Love if you follow our script, our traditions, our narrow definition of success. When Sarah proposed, I knew the invitation would be the true test. I spent weeks crafting personal, heartfelt notes to each family member. Handwritten, in Spanish, detailing our love, our dreams, our commitment. I poured my heart into every word, hoping that somewhere beneath the layers of tradition and fear, they would see me. Little did I know, those invitations were about to become the first act of a story far more complex than I could have ever imagined. The silence was my first warning. Not just silence, but a void so complete it felt like an orchestrated absence. Each day after sending the wedding invitations, I checked the mail with a mixture of hope and dread. Nothing came. No RSVP cards, no congratulatory notes, no acknowledgement that I existed. Sarah noticed my increasing tension. "Maybe they need time," she would say, her hand squeezing mine. But we both knew this was more than just time. This was deliberate erasure. I started making calls. Aunts, uncles, cousins, numbers I had known my entire life. Each call went to voicemail. Text messages remained unread. It was as if I had become a ghost in my own family's narrative. My cousin Maria, who I had once been close to, who had shared secrets and dreams with me during childhood summers, was the first crack in the wall of silence. A mutual friend showed me a screenshot of her Facebook post. "Pray for my family," it read. "Some wounds cannot be healed. Some choices destroy everything." The post was talking about me. I dove deeper, my lawyer's instinct for investigation taking over. Social media became my reconnaissance ground. Whispers, comments, carefully coded messages revealed a coordinated campaign. My family wasn't just rejecting me, they were actively constructing a narrative about my betrayal. "She has brought shame," my Aunt Lucia had commented on a private Facebook group. "Choosing a woman over her family's honor? Over our traditions?" The wedding was in 2 months. Sarah watched me carefully, sensing the storm brewing inside me. "We don't need their validation," she would say. But validation wasn't what I sought. Understanding was. I discovered they had been telling relatives I was confused, that this was a phase, that Sarah had manipulated me away from my culture. Each discovered message was another knife twist, revealing the depth of their rejection. My mother, who had once meticulously planned my quinceañera, was now planning how to erase me from family history. Old photographs were being untagged. Family group chats were reorganizing without me. I was being surgically removed from our family's collective memory. The wedding day approached. Sarah and I had built our guest list with friends, colleagues, her family. But the empty spaces where my family should have been felt like phantom limbs, painful, present in their absence. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about identity, culture, and the brutal mathematics of familial love. A love that apparently had very strict, unforgiving conditions. The day after our wedding, I began my methodical approach. Not with anger, but with the calculated precision of a corporate lawyer who had spent years studying how systems truly work. My revenge would not be an emotional outburst, but a surgical deconstruction. I created a war room in my home office, walls covered with interconnected documents, relationship maps, and financial records. Sarah would sometimes find me there late at night, surrounded by a web of information that only I could interpret. My first step was comprehensive research. I began with my Uncle Roberto's construction company, a business that had been the family's primary source of income for decades. Using my legal connections and professional network, I started gathering intelligence. Every permit, every contract, every regulatory filing became a potential weapon. I reached out to Carlos Mendez, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a previous case. "I need a complete financial audit," I told him. "Discretion is paramount." Carlos understood. We'd worked together on complex corporate investigations before, and he knew my reputation for thorough preparation. My cousin Marco, the golden child who had always been positioned as the family's success story, became my primary focus. His real estate development firm seemed pristine on the surface, but I knew better. No success is without compromise. I leveraged my professional network strategically. Dinner meetings with former law school colleagues, carefully placed questions to contacts in regulatory agencies, subtle inquiries that wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. Each conversation was a carefully laid brick in my future strategy. My legal expertise became my most potent weapon. I understood the difference between revenge and justice. This wasn't about destruction, it was about exposure. About revealing the thin veneer of respectability my family had constructed over years of hidden misconduct. I compiled evidence meticulously: bank transfers, questionable property acquisitions, potential tax irregularities. Each document was a puzzle piece, and I was determined to complete the picture. Sarah watched my transformation with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Are you okay?" she would ask, finding me surrounded by documents at 2 a.m. I would smile. "Better than okay. I'm preparing." My approach was multifaceted. I wasn't just planning legal action. I was creating a comprehensive strategy that would dismantle not just individual family members, but the entire network of relationships and perceived social standing they had carefully cultivated. The Rodriguez family had written me out of their story. Now I would ensure they would be remembered exactly as they deserved to be. not as successful immigrants living the American dream, but as people who had sacrificed family for a hollow version of success. My wedding ring glinted under the office light, a symbol of the love they had rejected and the strength I had found in choosing myself. The real work was about to begin. The first domino fell on a crisp Tuesday morning. I filed a quitam lawsuit against my uncle Roberto's construction company, alleging systematic fraud in government contracts. The legal papers were a masterpiece of precision, each allegation backed by meticulously collected evidence. Within weeks, federal investigators descended on Rodriguez Construction. I watched from a distance, not with malice, but with a clinical detachment that would have impressed my law school professors. This wasn't personal, this was accountability. My cousin Marco's real estate empire became my next target. Through a series of strategically placed anonymous tips and carefully documented financial irregularities, I triggered a state-level investigation into his development practices, zoning violations, undisclosed conflicts of interest, questionable land acquisitions. Each thread I pulled unraveled another section of his carefully constructed reputation. Sarah would find me reviewing documents late into the night. "Are you sure about this?" she'd ask, her hand on my shoulder. I'd look up, my eyes calm but determined. Absolutely. The family's initial response was predictable: denial, anger, attempts to use their local community connections to push back. But I had anticipated every move. Each of their attempts to defend themselves only exposed more of their underlying misconduct. I leveraged my professional network with surgical precision. A dinner here, a casual conversation there. I knew how information traveled, how reputations could be subtly eroded. My colleagues in corporate law began to view the Rodriguez family not as successful immigrants, but as potential case studies in corporate malfeasance. The first major blow came when a major investor pulled out of Marco's largest development project. Then another. The dominoes began to fall faster than they could catch them. Uncle Roberto's construction company found itself blacklisted from municipal contracts. Years of carefully built relationships began to crumble. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. This was about justice, not vengeance. My Aunt Lucia, once the family's social coordinator, found herself increasingly isolated. The community gatherings she had once hosted became sparse. Whispers replaced conversations. The social currency they had accumulated over decades began to depreciate rapidly. Each legal filing, each investigation was a calculated move. I wasn't destroying them. I was simply holding up a mirror, revealing the truth they had worked so hard to conceal. The most devastating moment came during a community fundraiser. I walked in, Sarah by my side, just as the first investigative report hit local media. I watched as the room's energy shifted, hushed conversations, sidelong glances. The Rodriguez family's carefully constructed narrative was coming apart at the seams. My mother tried to approach me once, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Why?" she asked. I looked at her, my voice calm and clear. "You wrote me out of our family's story. I'm simply writing the truth." This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, about showing that love cannot be conditional. That family is not a weapon, but a support system. And when that system fails, there are consequences. The investigations continued. The Rodriguez family's empire began to crumble, not from a single blow, but from the weight of their own accumulated deceptions. The final act began at the annual Rodriguez Family Charity Gala, an event they had hosted for decades, a symbol of their community standing. I arrived with surgical precision, Sarah by my side, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that screamed success. The ballroom fell silent when I entered. Years of whispers, of rejection, of erasure, all converged in this moment. I approached the microphone, my movements deliberate. The room was filled with extended family, community leaders, and the very people who had participated in my family's systematic rejection. My father sat at the head table, his face a mask of controlled panic. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and strong. For years, my family has prided itself on an image of success, of community leadership. Tonight, I'm here to reveal the truth behind that image. One by one, I began to unveil the evidence. Projected on the massive screens were financial records, investigative reports, documented misconduct, Uncle Roberto's construction company's illegal contract manipulations, Cousin Marco's real estate fraud, the systematic way they had built their success on a foundation of carefully concealed lies. "This is not about vengeance," I said, looking directly at my parents. "This is about accountability." The room was dead silent. I could see the color draining from my father's face, my mother's hands trembling almost imperceptibly. Years of hidden truths were being exposed under the harsh light of public scrutiny. I produced a series of documents, bank transfers, communication records, evidence of how they had systematically worked to isolate and erase me from their lives. Not just because of my sexuality, but because I refused to conform to their narrow definition of success. "You taught me one thing," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "The importance of building something real, of being true to oneself." My cousin Maria, who had once been my closest confidant, sat frozen. Marco's wife was visibly shaking. The community leaders who had once praised the Rodriguez family were now looking at them with suspicion. I wasn't just exposing their professional misconduct. I was revealing the emotional fraud they had perpetrated, the way they had conditional love, the way they had tried to control and define success through a lens of fear and conformity. Sarah squeezed my hand. She understood this wasn't about destruction, but about truth, about breaking cycles of generational trauma. As I concluded my presentation, I made one final statement. "I'm not asking for your love," I said, looking at my parents. "I'm demanding your respect. Not just for me, but for every person who has been told they are not enough because they don't fit into a predetermined narrative." The aftermath was immediate. Phones began to ring. Journalists who had been invited to the gala were already making calls. The Rodriguez family's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. My father approached, the microphone, his hands shaking. But there was nothing he could say. The truth was already out there, undeniable and devastating. As we walked out, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not anger, but a profound sense of liberation. I had rewritten the narrative. Not through destruction, but through exposure. Not through hate, but through an uncompromising commitment to truth. The Rodriguez family would never be the same, and neither would I. Part 6. Resolution and Personal Transformation. In the months following the gala, my life transformed in ways I never anticipated. The legal investigations continued, but I found myself more interested in healing than in further punishment. I established the Rodriguez Family Accountability Scholarship at my alma mater. It would support LGBTQ+ Latino students facing familial rejection, providing not just financial support, but mentorship and community. Each scholarship would be a testament to survival, to choosing oneself. My Aunt Lucia was the first family member to reach out after the events. A tentative email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she simply acknowledged the truth. "Some of what you revealed," she wrote, "was painful because it was true." Sarah watched me read the email, her hand finding mine. We had built a life together, not defined by my family's rejection, but by our own love and shared values. Our wedding, once a point of painful absence, was now a memory of pure joy and authentic connection. I began speaking at conferences, not about revenge, but about family, identity, and the complexity of cultural expectations. My story resonated with others who had experienced similar rejections. Each speaking engagement was a form of healing, not just for me, but for those listening. The Rodriguez family's empire had significantly diminished, but I discovered that true power wasn't about destruction. It was about creation, about building something meaningful from the ruins of what was expected. My younger cousins began reaching out. Hesitant messages, conversations about identity, about courage. They saw me not as a threat, but as a possibility, a different way of existing within our culture, not outside of it. During one of my scholarship foundation events, my mother appeared unexpectedly. She didn't approach me. She simply watched from a distance, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite define. Was it regret? Understanding? I realized I no longer needed to know. Sarah and I decided to start a family of our own. We would adopt, creating a circle of love defined by choice, not by blood. Our children would know they were loved unconditionally. The revenge I had planned had transformed into something far more powerful. Not a destruction of my family, but a reconstruction of my own identity. I had taken the weapon they intended to use against me, rejection, and turned it into a tool of empowerment. As I looked at the scholarship, recipients, young faces filled with hope and determination, I understood the true meaning of family. It wasn't about blood, it was about love, unconditional, unbreakable love. The Rodriguez family had tried to write me out of their story. Instead, I had written my own, more beautiful, more authentic than they could have ever imagined.